Hello, and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. Now, this is the next chapter of Magic of Moonlight, and I know I've been saying in the past few that I am up to chapter 18. I'm actually up to chapter 19 now. I'm up to chapter 19 now. So, Magic of Moonlight, chapter 17, the Alpha Ball. Griffin... Blah, blah. Try again. Ember watched through the glacier flat screen. She wanted to go back, and had been wanting to go back for a few days now. But there was still this tiny critical part of her mind that kept telling her that this was all lies, and that she was going back to be hurt. She could see Sebastian was sweating. He had taken his time taking off his own clothes before taking off hers. He was now lying next to her, his hand resting on her body while trying to keep the effects of his rut under control. It was the second day of their heat-rut cycle, and she could see him struggling. "Do you want him to go find another she-wolf?" Glacier asked in a flippant tone. "He'll be driven into his rut haze soon. And as you aren't exactly looking awake or alive, his primal instinct will make him seek out an unmated female who is." "No." Ember sat up and pressed her hands to the flat screen. She let out a very possessive growl. "He's mine. He can't go find someone else." "He'll be driven to do that if you don't wake up," Glacier replied. She wanted to provoke Ember into action. She knew Ember was second-guessing herself, and without the drive to fight for what was hers, she would continue to second-guess herself. "No." Ember's voice was stronger. Her hands pressed against the flat screen, her eyes trying to will her prone form awake. "Sebastian!" She pounded her fist against the flat screen. She wanted out. She wanted to wake up. Her heart was hurting with the thought of him being driven to seek someone else out because of her. Her head hurt going in circles thinking about who he might end up going to if she didn't wake up. She let out an enraged growl. Glacier could feel Ember's doubt being driven away by the singular thought that Sebastian was hers and hers alone. "Then wake up, Ember. That's all you need to do. Wake up!" She smiled internally, feeling herself being pulled back into the void. Ember's eyes opened. Her mind was confused. She could feel someone at her side. His hand sneaked over her body and caressed her breast gently. She could feel him poking into her thigh. Her breath caught in her chest. She was afraid of what she had come back to. "Ember?" Sebastian lifted his head up from her side and immediately moved to kiss her deeply. She felt drops fall on her face from him as she relaxed into the kiss. "I missed you so much, my love." Tears ran down his face. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen the signs. It's all my fault." Wordlessly, she reached up and pulled him back down to kiss her again. Sebastian obliged and shifted his body onto hers, pinning her to the bed. When they broke again, she whispered, "I know. And I saw what happened." She bit her lip, causing him to tap them lightly with his finger in an attempt to get her to stop. "Sorry I took so long to wake up. The critic in my head wouldn't stop telling me it was lies. I couldn't block it out. I doubted us so much." Sebastian leaned down and kissed her again gently. He paused and whispered, "How did you get out?" Ember's face reddened. He chuckled at her response, more curious now as to what happened. Glacier said your primal instinct may make you to seek out someone else to soothe your rut. She let out a possessive growl that sent shivers of excitement through him. You're mine. Sebastian smiled down at her. He took in her green eyes glowing fervently with a werewolf's basal instinct of possessiveness towards their mate. I'm yours. Every part of me, from my hair from my heart right down to the very tip of my hair, is yours. He let out his own possessive growl. And you're mine. He lowered his head and bit into her mark. Ember gasped loudly. Her body rippled with sparks that emanated from her marking spot. She could feel her body quickly heating up to meet the intensity of his rut. Yours, she replied, holding onto him tightly. She felt his hands moving across her body. He released her mark and smiled brightly. Darling, take me. I want you, she murmured to him. She could feel his excitement at her calling him by an endearment for the first time. As you wish, my love, he replied softly before starting his intensive worshipping and devouring of her body. You had us worried there, Alpha Alexis said at breakfast after their heat rut period finished. I wasn't sure how I was going to break it to Sebastian that he would have to leave you here. He pulled out a golden envelope and placed it on the table. I doubt he could take you on a flight in the condition you were. Sebastian sighed and stared at the golden envelope sitting on the table in front of him. It was an invitation to the annual Alpha Ball, where all the Alphas from across Australia would attend and network. The invitation was for the Alpha, Luna, and any children of the pair that were of age. If those children were mated, then the mates were also invited. Sebastian hated the ball, as Alphas of the packs who were not part of the Ancient Ten would try to push their daughters onto him. You don't have as much of a problem this year, Alpha Alexis replied with a slight smile in response to his sigh. You have Ember now. I still have a problem, Sebastian huffed. There are still some people at the school who don't believe she's my mate despite us marking each other publicly. Do you think those alpha she-wolves are going to believe it? I remember Caius going to this, Ember said, picking up the envelope curiously. He always came back and would complain about a she-wolf named Nicole. Called her a leech. She is, Sebastian sighed again heavily. She is a desert wolf with a city wolf mentality. Ever since the four of us future alphas came of age, she's been trying to get in our pants. She makes us take her as our chosen mate. She always attached herself to us and shamelessly flirt to try and get one of us to spend the night with her. He leaned over and took the envelope out of Ember's hands before placing it back onto the table again in front of his dad. I assume it's still going to run for 4 days? Yes. The expectation is for the future alphas to network with each other to ensure that they have awareness of which packs are nearby to assist if the need arises. Alpha Alexis replied gently. Would I even be allowed to go? Ember asked quietly. All the wolves there would be of age. I'm still underage. Sebastian let out a growl, making it clear he wasn't going to leave her behind regardless of if it was allowed or not. Alpha Alexis chuckled at his response. His Majesty will be there, so he can override the rules if need be. But the clause here that states the mates to the children of the Alphas are invited. While you are not of age to go as Alpha Marcus's daughter, you are able to go as Sebastian's mate. He leaned back and chuckled lightly. And besides, your birthday falls on the final day of the ball. I see. What? I see. She turned to peck a kiss on Sebastian's cheek before adding, if any she-wolf touches what is mine, they won't like what I'll do to them. Sebastian pulled her into a hug before squeezing her tightly, producing a very amused giggle from her. Protect me from the leeches, he proclaimed, nuzzling his nose into her neck. My own personal leech repellent. Ember burst out laughing before patting his back. You might need to bring a mask, darling. You'll inhale burnt leech if you aren't careful. Sebastian joined her hysterics and replied, I'll make sure to pack it, my love. Ember raised an eyebrow at her sulking mate. They learned that the current Alphas and Lunas were situated on the floor above, while the future Alphas and their mates were situated on the floor below. Caius and Violet's room was to their direct left. Logan and Toby's room was directly opposite, and Raven and Rita's room was diagonally across from them to their left. What was making Sebastian sulky was the wolves whose rooms were on their direct right and diagonal right. Direct right was Nicole, who had already tried to get her claws into Sebastian before Ember intervened and told her what for. The argument that ensued between the two she-wolves caused both hotel security and the parents of both Ember and Sebastian to come running. After Nicole caused a scene by claiming an underage she-wolf had no business being here, Sebastian let loose a massive growl before showing her that Ember was his marked mate, and, in nicer terms than he had used, to stop causing trouble. Nicole had stormed off, but Sebastian was sure that it wouldn't be the last time he would see her during the ball. The wolf to his diagonal right was named Balin. He was the future alpha of the City River Pack. He had propositioned Ember for a night with him as soon as he saw her. When she declined, he tried to lay his hands on her, which earned him a significantly loud slap in the face. Sebastian was about to step in to intervene when Ember fired up and lectured him about putting hands on a marked mate of another wolf. She never told him who her mate was, but made it perfectly clear that if he continued to do so, that her mate would have no issue ripping his hands off for his trouble. Once again, security had to step in to separate her from the wolf. He continued trying to intimidate her into spending a night with him. He kept taunting her by telling her that she was lying, as underage wolves never get marked. Sebastian looked up at her and let out another whine before dragging his feet over to where she was standing. He took his time savouring how she looked in her forest green gown. The strapless dress hugged her chest tightly, but not so tight that she looked uncomfortable. Loose strips of gauze wrapped over her biceps and trailed down to her wrists, giving an almost airy look to the top half. The rest of the dress hugged her hips and partway down her thighs before coming loose and airy again, flaring out as she walked. A split ran up the side to the middle of her thigh. He placed his hands on her waist before leaning down to kiss the top of her head. "Let's go, my little Spitfire," he said softly. He really didn't want to, but he knew this was one of those things he wouldn't have a choice in. Don't want to keep our parents waiting. Ember smiled at him before linking her arm in his. They walked out together and down the lift towards the ballroom on the ground floor. Sebastian was glad that they now shared a table with only their friends. In the past, it was only the four of them, and thus 4 random future alphas and children of alphas were placed at their table. Now, with Ember and her friends joining them as their mates, no one else could be seated at the table. Entering the room, he could see Caius, Logan, and Raven were already there along with their mates, but only one seat was unoccupied. His eyes narrowed at the she-wolf sitting in Ember's seat. "Leave, Nicole," he growled angrily, causing the she-wolf to jump and turn around to look at him. "Before I get security to make you leave." "But this is my allocated seat," she purred at him. She pointed at the placard in front of her. "See?" "We'll see about that." He grabbed the arm of a nearby Omega who was serving as waiter for that night. "Please bring me the Master of Ceremonies for tonight." "At once, Alpha," the Omega said with a bow before setting his tray down and ran off to find him. Nicole sat smugly in her chair and gave Ember a grin of satisfaction. Ember returned her smile with a very sardonic, almost evil-looking smile that gave Nicole pause. "Future Alpha Sebastian," Antonio, the Elder of Ceremonies, said with a smile. "What can I do for you?" "Is it true that my mate is not seated with me?" Sebastian asked with a level tone. He was bordering on wanting to accuse the Elder, but he didn't want to place blame where it was not deserved. "No." Antonio looked shocked. "His Majesty expressly asked for me to seat her with you, as she's your mate." Both of them knew the true reasoning why Ember wasn't seated with the other underage wolves who had to come due to care reasons. "Your grandfather was with me when I placed her card next to yours." "Explain that." Sebastian pointed at Nicole, who now looked pale. "Nicole claims that this was her allocated seat. I was tempted to call security to remove her, but I felt you were the best to give me a direct answer." Antonio growled at the she-wolf, causing her to get up from the chair. "Where did you put Ember's placard?" He growled again. Another growl was heard behind all of them, forcing Nicole to her knees. "I placed it on the children's table," she stammered unhappily. She was being forced to reveal her secrets by the king. "Why are you doing this, Your Majesty?" "I was the one who saw the proof with her mark that they were true mates," he growled, causing the entire ballroom to fall silent. "I was the one who personally released Ember from the curse on underage marking. I was the one who allowed early marking of her by Sebastian. They are marked mates, and you, claiming to be seated there, are not only disrupting the proceedings, but also attempting to separate them. Do not continue this train of action, or I will be forced to strip you of your status. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty," she replied meekly. Antonio picked up her placard and led her away to where she was supposed to be sitting. Lionel appeared and placed Ember's placard that he had retrieved from the children's table back where it was supposed to be. Turning, he came forward and gave Ember a hug. I didn't get to meet you properly after Trance's trial. I'm Lionel, Sebastian's grandfather, and the elder of familial ties and mates. Nice to meet you, sir, Ember replied softly. She had heard a lot about Lionel from Sebastian. He was a very firm and hot-headed alpha during his time. He had gotten into a lot of fights and pack wars, but one thing that Sebastian made clear was that his grandfather was big on family. That family had to be loyal to each other and extend that loyalty to the mates who had entered the family. He expected those mates to be loyal to the family as well, and any disloyalty was met with harsh criticism and punishment from him. Likewise, my dear, likewise. Lionel stepped back away and smiled. I'll leave you younglings to your friends now. He chuckled lightly before the king and him headed back to the front table where they were seated. Well, that was interesting, Logan commented as they took their seats. We were warning Nicole that she was going to embarrass herself, but she wasn't believing us. She kept talking about how the underage wolves should sit with the rest of the children since it's protocol. Logan chuckled at the expression Sebastian was making at the comment. We told her that you weren't going to let Ember sit away from you. We told her that if Ember was truly sitting at the children's table, then you more than likely would be joining her instead of sitting here. She didn't believe us, Raven chimed in with a smile. Rita was ready to tear Nicole's hair out if she kept insulting Ember. Kaya started laughing. Violet as well. She was actually ready to kick Nicole hard under the table. He shook his head. Nicole is going to up the ante, and I'm guessing you will be her target, Sebastian. Out of all of us, only you has an underage mate. Meaning, in her mind, Ember can't defend herself if she partially shifts into her wolf. Ember laughed lightly. Well, she'll learn that she can't touch me. But she glanced up at Sebastian, who was glancing back down at her. It will force your hand, you know. It will force your hand, you know. I know, he whispered in reply. I'm ready, if I have to. Everyone nodded their head, understanding that by Sebastian having his hand forced meant that they all would be forced to take their future roles much faster than anticipated. And that's it. I have just one more chapter to record before I finish for the night. Or finish recording audio for the night. I do need to record more goldfish. Goldfish? Koi fish. Koi fish! Koi fish. Anyway. But yeah, I do have to record more koi to put this to. Anyway. But yeah. Let me know what you think. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And I will see you in the next one. And as always, let your imagination grow wild. Bye for now.